Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and I'm here to talk to you all about what's going on in the Big Ten. Joined by Frank, joined by Shaps, two awesome guys from the Big Banter Network. We're going to recap some amazing games, some not so amazing games for the Big Ten this weekend, and we're also going to talk about how conference play is starting. Some of these teams playing their first conference game, some of these teams playing their second, and there are some teams, this season is just not going the way they thought. Other teams where they thought they were having a great season, and I'm talking about myself, my own Buckeyes, thinking, how did we get to this point? Don't worry, we'll talk about it. And if you're a Michigan fan or somebody who hates Ohio State, you'll heal my tears. Don't worry. But first, I want to let these guys introduce themselves and tell you where you can find their podcast at. Frank, you want to go first?
Yeah, my name's Frank. Official title is the Director of Statistical Operations for the Boiler Express podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Boiler_Express, on YouTube, Boiler Express Podcast. If you prefer audio, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you can listen to an audio podcast, you can find us there. JR, super excited to be here and talk some basketball with you guys.
Love it. Yeah, I'm sure you got a lot to say about your team this weekend, and happy about that. So, and the peons of the Big Ten can't even win their games. Shaps, introduce yourself. Tell people where they can find you at.
Yeah, absolutely, JR. My name's Shaps, and sometimes referred to as the Spy. You can find me on the Javamen podcast to cover Fighting Illini basketball. We've got a rotation of hosts that come on, all of us good friends from our Champaign days, and great to be a part of the Big Banter Network now.
Awesome. Yeah, love to have it, and love to have you here, Shaps. Appreciate it, man. All right, let's before we get into it, hold on. I always got to say this stuff, even though I want to get into it. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. We have this awesome new surrounding here, and it tells you right down there, like and subscribe. Okay, so you'll never forget. We're also going to have the games and scores like that. So if nothing else, just for my own heart and the hard work that I do, please like and subscribe. We appreciate that. And check out Big Banter Sports, bigbantersports.com for all your Big Ten media needs. And if you're new to the show, we live stream every night or every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Talk through Big Ten basketball and Big Ten football. But it's the basketball episode, so let's get into it, guys. Michigan State faced Nebraska tonight, and Michigan State continuing the struggle. They lost 70-77 to Nebraska. It was a tough game. It was a tough circumstance for the Spartans, and I'm not really sure where the Spartans go from here, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Shap, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, just got finished watching this game. It really came down to the wire. I mean, going into it, I thought this might be a little bit of a trap game for Michigan State, coming off the Wisconsin game, and then they've got Baylor, I think, in a few days. So I did worry about them going into, Sleepy Lincoln on a Sunday night. And so, but I was kind of hoping that the getting blown out by Wisconsin, a few days earlier would kind of force them to wake up a little bit and not just kind of sleepwalk through this and actually show up for it. And they did. They battled pretty well, but with Michigan State, it always just seems to come down to those end of game situations where everyone knows the ball's going to Walker, and he just doesn't have any help, it seems like, right? Like, just at the end of this game, Nebraska was double teaming him because they know he's going to try to take those last shots. And then he's going to find an open teammate. Malik Hall was wide open for a three and hit nothing but the backboard. So it's like just no one else is going to step up for them. And credit to Nebraska because they got contributions from everyone, especially towards the end of that game. They were dominant. They were moving the ball well, and they were making their free throws, which really just put the game away for Michigan State. So just a really, really disastrous start for their season.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the critiques that I had about Michigan State, last podcast saying they weren't even going to make the tournament, they're looking soft, that kind of stuff. I mean, they came out and their big men did play better. Malik Hall, like you said, he did miss that into the game 3, but he did have 22 points tonight. He was kind of the main guy to go to, which is hard to do with Tyson Walker on the floor as well. But I mean, Sissoko, he just wasn't anything that you really needed there. Only 3 rebounds. You just need more production from your bigs if you're going to come into the Big Ten and play better here. The guards are obviously really good on Michigan State, but without this bigs help, it's just really, really difficult for them. Frank, what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you really kind of saw this as a must-win game for both teams. Nebraska started really hot. They started 7-0. They're coming off of 2, I'll call them respectable wins. No one really expected the Creighton blowout. I know I predicted a Nebraska win last time I was on here, so a little bit of egg on my face for that one. But, Michigan State, they came in 4-4, and they do have the 46th hardest schedule in the country, according to KenPom right now. So no real bad losses. I mean, if you want to count tonight's loss against Nebraska as a bad one, that's up for debate. But yeah, I mean, we saw Tyson Walker tried to take over, and in my opinion, he doesn't need to. It shouldn't come down to Tyson Walker being the guy you have to go to on every possession. We did see Malik Hall miss that 3 at the end, but there are enough pieces around him where I just don't feel like that's necessary, where we're needing to go isolation for him down the stretch. But hats off to Nebraska. K-State Tominaga, dropped 15, 3 for 7 from 3. You know what he's going to do. Juwan Gary just looked fantastic. But really, like, one guy who stuck out to me was Rink Mass tonight. I mean, just playing his heart out. I think he have 12 rebounds in the game, I want to say. Was really just commanding the floor on defense. He was navigating screens. He was pre-switching. He was point switching. He was just commanding the floor and playing harder than anyone else. And he hit, I don't want to call it the dagger, but he hit the shot to put him up 4 with about 40 seconds to go in the post. It was kind of an awkward. He got the ball knocked out of his hand and kind of pivoted a little bit and went up to go up with the shot. But
he had that unbelievable block too on the dunk attempt. I can't remember who that was, but that was an unbelievable block. I'm like, who is this guy?
And I feel like C.J. Wilcher deserves an honorable mention too, because in the second half, Michigan State would get up 6-7. Or I'm sorry, Nebraska would get up 6-7. Michigan State would come back, cut it to 2, and it seemed like Wilcher was always the guy who made the play. Now, looking at the box score, he only had 10 points, but they were just every point he had was so timely. Michigan State would cut it 2 or 3, and then bang, like he'd hit a 3, he'd make a play. I mean, he was electric tonight, and he did the things that aren't going to show up in the box score, but. I mean, this is what you want in conference play, right? You want these exciting games that go down to the wire that are just absolute slugfest. And, it's interesting that like neither team could really find a rhythm offensively starting out. It definitely felt like, Nebraska was giving Michigan State a hard time. Every time a guy was coming off the screen, there was someone right there. They just weren't really getting any good looks. And, then it turned into kind of a free-for-all offensively. But just a fantastic game. One of the more entertaining games I've seen in conference play this season. Probably the second after Purdue and Northwestern, which didn't end well, as we all know for me, but it was still an entertaining game for sure.
We won't just bring that up for you again, Frank. We'll let you bring that up one time, and we'll move on from there. So, no, I think you're exactly right. I do struggle with this Michigan State team because, like I said at the beginning, last episode, I don't think they're going to make the tournament this year. I know it's kind of a hot take, and I know people are going to say you're crazy. Tom Izzo's going to get this team rolling. I get all that. But even when Michigan State started flat before and they didn't win their games, they always came out and looked like rejuvenated against some of their bigger opponents later on. You didn't see a sleeper game like this against Nebraska. Now, I'm not trying to degrade Nebraska and make them seem like they're a bad team or a bad program. They're obviously, they're 8-2. They have that blowout loss to Creighton. But, I mean, it's been a good year for Nebraska so far. But still, like, just by name recognition, you think Michigan State would come in there and say, we need some respect, we need to go in here, play the hard-nosed game, and win it. And when it came down to it at the end of the game, they couldn't win it. And I don't see the same Tom Izzo teams that I normally have. Shaps, am I crazy?
No, not at all. And Michigan State came in beating Nebraska 11 straight times. So I thought this would be kind of like a get-right game for them a little bit, especially, like I said, coming off of that Wisconsin blowout. But I said in our preseason Javamen pod that I was very worried for Michigan State because they fit the profile of the North Carolina team from last year, where they were kind of just average, and managed to get into the tournament. Michigan State was a 7 seed. North Carolina was an 8 seed, I think, right? And then they went on that run. Michigan State, kind of a similar thing, where they were just in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten, and then they closed the season well. They played well in March. Everyone sees that. Then everyone sees, oh, all those guys are coming back. Well, we got to put them as a top 5 team then in the preseason poll. And I was not buying that at all, because the North Carolina case, I'm like, this is the exact same team that we saw struggle for a lot of the year, just be kind of a middle of the road team. And that's really what's, has been the case so far this season. So I don't know. If you're a Spartan fan, are you hitting the panic button at this point, starting 0-2 in the Big Ten?
I mean, what do you think, Frank? If you're a Spartan fan, are you hitting the panic button?
Well, Shaps, I think you hit the nail on the head in that I, too, was very confused when they were so highly regarded, in the offseason, because, yes, they were returning everybody, but this was a sub-20 win team regular season last year. Mm-hmm. But, they have played a really tough schedule, and it doesn't get any easier. They have Baylor next, and they have Oakland, who's, as I said last time, is good for one upset. We've already seen them do it once. So they're good.
They gave us a fight.
They're always good for a couple upsets every year. It just seems like they're always in the mix. So I don't think it's time to hit the panic button. However, you lose another one to Baylor. Now we're talking panic button time. I mean, ultimately, the old school rule of you need 20 wins, that doesn't necessarily apply anymore. But you need to go into conference play with a 3-4 game cushion if your goal is a postseason. Like I said, they have played a really tough schedule. But they've been on the losing end in a lot of their tough games, and then starting the season kind of again like they did against James Madison, it's not ideal either. But they're one game away, JR, in my opinion, from hitting the panic button.
I agree. I mean, I'm already hitting the panic button if I am a Spartan fan, but one more game, that would just have me slamming it. Just going all out and just punching my fist. I don't want to actually punch my fist on the table because it wouldn't sound great with my microphone, but I agree. So, all right, well, Frank, let's go ahead and move on to your guys. Purdue wins 92-86 over Alabama. Zach Edey was a one-man wrecking crew. He just said, you get thrown out of the game. You get thrown out of the game. It doesn't matter who you're going to put on me. I'm going to make you foul me. I'm going to hit all my free throws, and you can't do anything about it. Welcome to Big Ten country, Alabama. This is what Big Ten teams have been dealing with for all this time. Not to take anything away from Purdue, Frank. Obviously, Purdue's a great team. But this is what we've been dealing with. Frank, what are your thoughts?
Toronto is Big Ten country now?
Well, I mean, it is Zach Edey's hometown, so it was for that game, maybe.
They bred him for Big Ten country.
I did see pictures of the crowd, and it did look pretty one-sided. I don't think many Alabama fans made it out there. And Nate Oates even said in the press conference that it was basically a true road game for him, which to me kind of sounded like a little bit of a cop-out, a little bit of an excuse, which you don't expect from Nate Oates. But, yeah, I mean, the big story in that game was just, who saw Alabama with a 72% three-point attempt rate. Like 72% of their shots were three-pointers in that game. I think it was 46 threes they took. They hit, 13 or 14 going into halftime. But this morning I pulled data from every game played so far this season, which at the time was 3,362. That was the highest three-point attempt rate yet this season out of 3,300 games. Wow. So, that's just an insane clip. And they were hitting them. They were hitting a lot of them. And guys who don't make many threes or haven't shot many threes. The gentleman's name, Grant Nelson, right? Purdue did a really good job of not panicking when he started 2 for 2. He's traditionally not a shooter. He finished the game 2 for 7, but really hats off to Mark Sears. It just seemed like he didn't miss. And when I look at the box score and see he went 8 for 16 from 3, I mean, I would have thought he went 14 for 16 in that game. It just he wasn't missing. But really, I mean, you said Zach Edey was kind of the storyline. I would challenge that and maybe put Braden Smith in there. Oh, because sure. his pick and roll readability in that game was at a level I haven't seen before. I mean, he attacked all sorts of different coverages. He passed out of hedges. He drove to the basket when they played weak coverage on him. He did a really good job of kind of calling for rescreens and they're playing drop coverage and finding his own shot. And he just played within the game without. There's a little bit of a stretch in the second half where he was kind of looking to force him up there. but really just a tremendous performance from him. I mean, he blew my mind in that game. Honestly, I went back and rewatched it. It was just elite in terms of his reading ability. But a game of runs, Bama got up early 8-0. Purdue went out to 14-4 run after that, and didn't take their lead till midway through the second half. But ultimately, they did what they needed to do to pull out the win. And it's a game that got my heart rate going a little bit. But honestly, happy to get the win and get out of there, because Alabama's a really good team. They've been on the losing end of a couple close games, Ohio State aside. But yeah, really happy to get out of there with that win for sure.
Don't bring up Ohio State, Frank. We'll talk about them later. Don't worry. Yeah, no, I agree, and that was going to be the second thing I brought up after you were done. Is don't sleep on Braden Smith. Now, Mr. Go Right all the time, but he goes right because it's right for him, and he, he makes it happen. So you can't really complain that much when he's able to do that. And him and Edey, they're so unstoppable together when they're gelling and they're working. Some teams like Northwestern have done some things. I know I said I wouldn't bring it back up, Frank. I'm sorry, but. They've done some things here and there to really mess with him, but I mean, game in and game out, Braden Smith has been solid all season long. He's made that jump that you've wanted him to make to really excel not only his game, but the game of this entire team. Shaps, what were some of your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, we know Edey is going to get his 25 to 35 points. There's not a whole lot you can do to stop him. But what makes them so dangerous is when either Braden Smith or Fletcher Lawyer also go off in the game, and then they're pretty much unstoppable when they have two guys like that. And that's kind of the story for most teams too. Like, you can have one guy go off. In this case, Mark Sears did for Alabama, but you really do need two guys in these high level games to be able to win. Yeah, I mean, Edey, 11 of 11 at the free throw line too, I thought was incredible. He played 37 minutes. I don't know how you play 37 minutes when you're that big. That seems impossible to me. But I mean, that's a credit to him. I also it's interesting to watch him this year. He's playing with so much more emotion. Like, he's actually like talking smack to other teams. Like, he's yelling at the crowd, getting them going. Like, he was always like this shy, reserved kid, like in the past few years, like just kind of lumbering along. Now he's become like a vocal leader of that team. I'm sure winning National Player of the Year boosts your confidence a little bit, but I think it's fun to see him, like really come alive. Like, after a dunk and one, he's screaming into the crowd and stuff like that. So I think that's really good to see. If you're Purdue. Yeah, Bama, they shot 41% from three and still lost. It's pretty remarkable. But like I said, that's what Purdue is going to do to you. Like, when multiple guys have huge games like that, or at least one guy additional to Edey, because you always know he's going to have a big game, they're really, really hard to stop.
Yeah, and I last season, I kind of watched hating Purdue every single week. And this season, I just decided, give up, just watch and enjoy a really, really good basketball team. Because last season, I kid you not, I watched every game and I just I was just upset every single game. I was like, stop this game. Because they were just so unstoppable in so many games. But I kind of just like made this mental, I don't know, a decision in my mind that, like, I'm just going to watch Purdue this year and just enjoy good basketball, a dominating physical player that cannot be stopped, and evolution of players. I mean, that's what I've enjoyed from seeing Purdue all year long. I've also enjoyed the stuff you mentioned about Edey and his emotion and kind of coming more into himself, like you said there, Shaps. But just like the entire team elevating around him, because Edey has turned into, not that he wasn't last year, but I feel like he's become more of it, elevating the entire team as well as not only himself. And I think that's a testament to his game, and also what Matt Painter is doing as well. Matt Painter doesn't get enough credit for what's going on here. Frank, you got any final thoughts before we wrap up this game?
No, I also have seen the the emotional uptick from Edey, and I'll be honest, I don't know how I feel about it. Just because it feels really dumb when you lose, because he did a lot of that against Northwestern too. So I mean, I'm a fan of, like, speak softly and carry a big stick, right? Just let what happens on the court. But I think that, Braden's kind of that way too. He was definitely that way in high school. If you watch his high school footage, he was a big smack talker as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised no one brought up any fouls. There's been a lot of controversy about Edey had committed 40 fouls in that game or whatnot. But
I'm over it. Yeah, there's no use complaining about it anymore. He gets treated very, very differently. I don't envy the refs. You can call a foul on him every play, or you can call a foul, against him on every play. It's just is what it is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the recipe to defend Edey is just to play him really physically, whether that includes fouling or just, like we saw Tennessee, that felt like defended him really well without fouling him. But I definitely seemed like Alabama was fouling. And what's his name? Nick Pringle should have gotten his 5th foul like 5 minutes before he did, because he came through with a block that like hit Caleb first in the head. So I felt like Edey would have gotten a few more points. But like I'm kind of beyond that point too, where I'm just like he did get away with a couple travels. But I went back and watched it, and I felt like he did a good job of not really being too physical. He did get hit with the hook and hold in that game. But yeah, it was. I mean, that, like I said, I don't think a game had got my heart rate going quite like that one. To see Alabama hit threes at the clip that they did and still be in the game the entire time was just crazy. But we've seen Purdue win different types of games, and I think that that's just going to bode well if Purdue is fortunate enough to make it to the postseason. There's no guarantees. So
if they do make it to the postseason.
Yeah. Just I'm not having that assumption right now.
Okay, all right. I don't feel about Purdue's postseason hopes like I feel about Michigan State's. I'll just make that clear really fast.
No.
All right, let's move on to the next one. We got Wisconsin and Arizona. Boy, this was a rough one for the Big Ten. Arizona just really took care of business, and Wisconsin riding high after that Michigan State win, and they're kind of coming back down to earth, saying, "What in the world? How do we make this happen? Where do we go from here?" But to Arizona's credit, Arizona is a very, very good basketball team. If there's a team that's going to challenge Purdue this year, if there's a team that I feel like they could honestly go back and forth if they played like a 10-game series, and it would be five out of 10 each way, it would probably be Arizona, because they're just a fantastic basketball team, and I think that their athleticism and some of the things that they do offensively were just too much for Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a good basketball team, but I think they kind of got overwhelmed by that athleticism as well. Shaps, what were some of your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this game ended pretty quickly. Arizona's just so good. They have so many different guys that can take over a game. Between Boswell and Larson and Caleb Love, it's hard for me to watch Arizona games sometimes because Kylan Boswell is from Champaign. So it's really difficult when your team doesn't have a point guard and you have to watch this kid. He should have gotten the bag that Sky Clark got, ideally, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, the Badgers, they were kind of due for a letdown, and if this is going to be your letdown, that's okay. They've been playing pretty well lately. AJ Storr, also a former Illini commit, gives them just a totally different dimension that they were missing last year. So yeah, the Badgers have shown, though, they're going to be a tough out in the Big Ten. A lot better than some of us expected.
Well, and the Badgers were kind of the opposite of Wisconsin, right? Or of Michigan State, right? They brought back a lot of their starters, and I was kind of one of those people that's like, listen, if we're going to look at Michigan State and say they're bringing back all these players and all this, that was going on, why aren't we looking at Wisconsin? I know they didn't play as well as Michigan State, but, they are bringing back a lot of experience, and that experience is starting to show. Like I said, the athleticism from Arizona just kind of took over in this one, but don't sleep on Wisconsin. I don't think this is an indictment on what their season is going to be. I still think they're probably a top 4 team in the Big Ten this season. If they keep playing this way, we'll see how things go, because obviously teams can, get beaten down in the Big Ten and things can get rough for them. But I like this Wisconsin team. I think they can contend for a top 4 spot in the Big Ten. Frank, what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't expect this, honestly. Wisconsin was hot. They were coming off of some really good wins, and Arizona looked terrifying, to be honest. But one thing that really stuck out to me, just looking at the numbers from the game, going into the game, Wisconsin had averaging 61 possessions per game. In this game, they had 74. Now, a lot of that's due to Arizona's pace and them playing really fast. So Arizona's going to play fast, going to give Wisconsin more possessions. But I just feel like Arizona's game plan really just changed a lot and kept Wisconsin on their toes. I mean, at first, they were really getting them with the pick and pop kind of ghost screens for Pelle Larsson. And then they started going down low with Umar Ballo and Tyler Wallace. It's a great matchup to watch the entire game. But Wisconsin, they continued to play the drop coverage throughout the entire game, and Arizona just kept attacking it over and over and over again. Caleb Love took a lot of advantage of their drop coverage there. And then, what we saw, Wisconsin just were switching up ball screen coverages the entire game, and Arizona was just making the right reads out of all of them. But, defensively, Arizona was really blowing up everything Wisconsin was trying to do. And Wisconsin just looked a little slow. I mean, they hung in there for the majority of the first half, but I just think they were physically and athletically outmatched. But that being said, hats off to Arizona. They looked really good. Umar Ballo looks fantastic. I can't wait to see him and Edey go at it next weekend. It's going to be a fantastic game. But JR, I'm with you. I don't think, that Wisconsin is going to hurt much from this. I still think I would put them in the top 3 in the Big Ten right now, honestly. Mm-hmm. I just think that, it was just a bad night, and Arizona performed way above baseline in terms of their offensive performance.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, Wisconsin did a good job there. I think they got down by 9 or something, something like that early. And that was when I was kind of like, oh no, this isn't good for Wisconsin. Because Wisconsin does not strike me as a team that plays well from behind. I didn't think, you go down early to Arizona. They're fast paced, like you talked about, Frank, that this isn't going to be good for them. But, I mean, they crawled their way back, and Arizona got a little bit ahead, and they crawled their way back. But, I mean, around, the 8-minute mark or something like that, Arizona went on that run, and they just really kind of took it over from there. And that was when I said, this is, to me, just not a game that Wisconsin can win, unfortunately. I mean, when you're behind that much. And how weird is it that we say Caleb Love when we're talking about Arizona? Wasn't he supposed to be a Michigan guy or something? But yeah, all around, I think Wisconsin's got better basketball ahead of them this season. So, all right, Shafts, let's talk about your guys. Illinois loses. Illinois loses 79-86 against Tennessee. This was a game that I felt like was kind of one of those ones where Tennessee kind of got everything that they wanted out of Illinois. Don't get me wrong, it was still a closer game. But I say that in terms of, I think Tennessee really excels in isolation defense, and Illinois really excels in isolation offense. And so it was kind of a perfect pairing of seeing how those two would go against each other. And it just happened to turn out that Tennessee won in those situations more often than Illinois did, which was difficult for them. The lack of assists and the lack of passing, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, the point guard Shafts, is really kind of wearing on them. And I think Tennessee took advantage of that a little bit. But I'm not down on Illinois at all after this game. I think this was kind of a hard matchup. I think Tennessee is a very good defensive team. They had a good scheme going into this one. And so I think, after some of Illinois' wins lately, I think you still got to remember those, even with this loss here. Shaps, what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, two really good defensive teams. Both were top 10 in KenPom going into the game. And so this went the way I wasn't expecting. It was a really high-scoring affair, back and forth. The first half especially was really high-level shot-making, really fun game to watch. Tennessee's 19-2 at home since 2021, so we knew this was going to be very difficult. Coming off of a big road trip that we've been on. We went to Rutgers, and then we just stayed out east to play in the Jimmy V Classic and got that good win against FAU. So didn't have the highest of hopes going into this game, but was hoping for a good showing. And I thought we got that. I was really happy actually at halftime. We had the lead, even though Shannon was really struggling. It was clear that Tennessee was not going to let Terrence Shannon beat them. Every time he was driving, there was 3, sometimes 4 guys collapsing in the lane on him. But, other guys were really stepping up, especially Quincy Guerrier, transfer from Oregon. he's really struggled offensively for most part of the season. He was coming off a hand injury, so his shot wasn't really looking good. He also had a baby like a few weeks ago, so seemed to be really struggling right around the time that baby arrived. As my
Probably
fellow
lack of sleep.
dads,
Probably
my fellow
lack of sleep.
dads can attest to. Sometimes you're not sleeping so well. It's probably tough to get up for some of these games. But he had the best game of his season with 22 points, 5 rebounds. So we felt good going into the second half. We had a lot of the momentum. The crowd was very quiet. And then they decided to call a hook and hold on Ty Rodgers on a free throw. The interesting part of this one was they didn't initially call a hook and hold. They only called, a common foul, which was a terrible call to begin with because you could see the replay. He gets pushed in the back by Dalton Connect, which would have been his third foul. But then they go and review it, and they call a flagrant for a hook and hold, and it was just a horrible, horrible call. He didn't prevent, the Tennessee guy from going for the rebound at all. So it didn't really make sense at all. So then after that, Tennessee, gets basically 4 points out of that call. They go on something like a 10-0 run. It was at one point it was 16-5 Vols run after that flagrant. That got the crowd really into it too, and they continued to just call ridiculous fouls against Illinois, and it was very, very lopsided in the second half. And that was the only thing that got the crowd really going too. The crowd was basically taken out of the game until the referees started going on their side and the crowd started getting into it. That's when Dalton Connect just went off. He's such a good player. He can beat you in a variety of ways. The combination of him and Vescovi are really, really dangerous. And then you got their little point guard who just gets in the lane and can really hurt you. But like I said, the calls went against us, but we got too reliant on the 3-point shot in the second half. Terrence Shannon and Marcus Damask really struggled. They weren't going to let them beat us. And then we just started launching threes, which is kind of like regression for us. We've been much better about that in recent games. And this is kind of going back to like how we looked early in the season when it was just too dependent on the 3-point shooting. We were 9 of 36 from deep, just 25%. And it was clear that Shannon was getting really frustrated too. He was only 1 of 6 from deep. And the thing about Shannon so far this year is obviously teams are collapsing on him. You don't want to let him get to the rim, but he's shooting 45% from 3 this year, which is a massive improvement from last year. So it seems like there's just no way to stop this guy, because if he's not getting to the rim, he's knocking down threes. But obviously if he struggles from 3, then it's not going to be good. He still ended up with 22 points, I think, but a lot of that came late in the game. He's always going to get to the free throw line, but yeah, it was really just a matter of the rest of the team struggling and just not getting any flow in the offense at all. I was proud that we did end up covering the spread at the end. If you got like 7 or 7.5, well done for you. But yeah, I wasn't too down after this game. I was pissed about the Zebras, but I was still happy that we went 2-1 on this little road trip, and we can still close out this calendar year pretty well. I think we've got a game against Colgate coming up next, and then we take on Mizzou in the annual bragging rights game in St. Louis, which there will be a number of Javamen in attendance for that one. It's always a fun atmosphere, and Missouri kind of stinks this year, so hopefully we get a win over them. But yeah, it was still a good, entertaining game, and not too down about the loss.
Yeah, no, for sure. I noticed the frustration as well. That was another thing I was going to bring up, that, there for a little bit, it just seemed like everything Illinois was trying to do offensively just wasn't flowing the way they wanted it to. And that happens sometimes, but it was like, Tennessee would come down and get a quick shot or get a quick make or something like that, and you just kind of saw the dejection on the Illinois players. So hopefully, they'll, and I think Brad Underwood is a good enough coach. He'll kind of get with that and be like, guys, that happens sometimes. We can make it from there. And I think they will. I think this is a good learning experience for Illinois. And like I said, I'm not thinking low of Illinois after this one. A lot of it because of the Zebras as well, like you pointed out there, Shaps. Quick note, sorry guys, the bottom there, Guerrier, I can never pronounce his name right. He did have 22. He did have 22 points, not 35. Sorry about that. That was a
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah, miss on my part. That looks a lot better. What's that? Like almost half the score of the team there. But yeah, my bad, guys. Sorry on that one. Frank, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I did think Gary had a really good game to start off. I also was really impressed with what Luke Goody did. I mean, I know he didn't play a ton, but I felt like he contributed some meaningful minutes. And JR, I'm glad you brought it up that, stylistically, this is going to be a really interesting game. So Illinois is 36% assist percentage in the second percentile in Division I right now. So they I think 40% of their shots are from either isolation or spot up too. So they're not passing the ball a ton, but I mean, I really felt like, guard. yeah, that hurts, unfortunately. But I felt like in the first half, Illinois was making really tough shots, and Tennessee was missing really good shots. And I was concerned, because I always root for Big Ten and non-con, but I was concerned because I was concerned that they would kind of regress to their mean. But just a couple possessions in the first half, we saw just Illinois put three guys on the perimeter, run a spread ball screen. Shannon takes a contested three. There was one possession where Hawkins had the ball, passes it into the post, passes it right back out, takes a contested three, and it goes in. But Tennessee were missing some easy buckets or easy baskets at the rim, and we're missing some open threes. And I was just concerned that something had to change offensively for Illinois and defensively to win the game. And I just think that, when you look at the box score and you look at Coleman Hawkins, 12 points on 13 shots. Shannon had 22 points on 16 shots. He had a 114 offensive rating. Ultimately, it's trying to figure out how those two guys kind of coexist. And I think that's where winning's going to come for this Illinois team. But I think that, they did a good job of Tennessee did a good job of forcing Illinois to play their game. Illinois didn't really make him work on the defensive end a whole lot. So I think going forward, like you said, Brad Underwood's a really good coach. I have a high amount of respect for him. I think he'll get this team ready to go. I just think that, Hawkins and Shannon are probably two of the top 10 players in the Big Ten. It's just figuring out how they coexist and how to make a winning product out of them consistently, I think is really going to be the key for this team going forward. But, it was a really entertaining game. I do agree that hook and hold call was pretty atrocious. And I'm just not a fan of the hook and hold in general, because I'm sure if you don't know, it was created for Purdue when Isaac Haas got injured in the tournament and they broke his elbow. So it's got always a salty thing for us Purdue fans, because it wasn't even a foul when it happened to Isaac Haas. So, I think that going forward, it's a game that's going to help Tennessee. Or it's going to help Illinois. I'm sorry, they're both orange. That's why I keep getting them mixed up in my head. So I'm thinking about the game. So, I think going forward they're going to figure it out. And Shannon can just keep his frustration and not chuck up as many bad shots as he did in that game. He'll be really good going forward.
Boy, you're just going to bring up Isaac Haas and make me think of another Purdue guy that I hate watching for so long. He was good too. I think you hit it on the head with everything you were saying there, Frank. So I think just going forward, tough game for Illinois, tough loss, but at the end of the day, you still lost by only 7 on the road against a top 20 team that had the Zebras on their side. So in my mind, Illinois is going to be fine. They're still number 2 in the Big Ten in my mind right now. So until they beat Purdue, which if they beat Purdue, maybe we'll see. But I'm sure that day will come. I don't know what date that is yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to look it up after this. So, all right, before I move on, I do want to remind everybody about CBB Analytics. CBB Analytics gives us a free subscription for this podcast, so that way we tell you about it. It's a really cool site, a lot of data. If you're somebody who likes to just kind of dig deep into data and what's going on, you can kind of figure those things out. Ken Palm is great. CBB Analytics takes it to a whole new level. So go check out CBB Analytics. They have free stuff. They have pro tier stuff, all different kinds of stuff that you can have there. So let me cough first. And I'm back. All right, guys. I need to make sure I got some out of there because Ohio State played. I'm mad. They gave up an 18-point lead to a team that lost to Bucknell, and they beat them. Chris Holtmann is officially entering his slump early as well. It doesn't normally happen this early in December, but, Big Ten play happens, so here it comes. I was so high on Ohio State. I was thinking so high of them. I thought, man, they have two of the best guards in the Big Ten. I thought, Felix Okpara is really coming along. Evan Mahaffey can't score, but he plays really good defense. I was thinking so well of this team. Then they got up by 18 points. I actually turned the game off for a little bit. I was going to come back to it, so I turned it off for a little bit. I went to a high school little play show that my wife wanted to go to, and as I'm there, I check the score, and I see the score is like tied. And I was like, oh no, what happened here? And I start watching the game, and I'm just immediately put in a bad mood because I thought to myself, how is a team that lost to Bucknell coming back by 18 points to win in this game? Kanye Clary, that's how. And Ohio State not playing defense, that's how. Frank, talk me off a ledge. Am I overreacting here? What are your thoughts?
I didn't really think that Ohio State did anything wrong. I just felt like, Penn State just had some things go their way. Kind of the one thing I saw from Ohio State was I feel like maybe they overlooked, and I'm just saying maybe because I don't know, maybe they overlooked Leo O'Boyle. Mm-hmm. They just lost him a couple times in transition early in the game. There was one possession where I think it was Gale where they got Leo O'Boyle the ball in transition, and Gale just kind of like swiped at him a couple times and stepped away, and he was like, all right, and just threw it up and it went in. And, outside of that, it took a guy, DeMarco Dunn, having a career game, to really put, because you expect that from Kanye Clary. I don't think you expect necessarily that for those two guys, but Boyle hit the shot to force overtime against Maryland. I just thought that it was more of Penn State playing really out of their minds late in the game, and they scored 29 points in the last 10 minutes to Ohio State's 16, more so than it was. Ohio State had some good shots there at the end. And, they were really forcing Penn State into some tough rotations, and they were hitting those shots for the majority of the game. They just stopped going in late in the second half. So, I mean, if that's the one thing you have to say negative, that open shots didn't go in, I mean, you just have to tip your cap at that point, and trust me, I know about that. I saw Purdue play against Fairleigh Dickinson. Open shots didn't go in. So I feel like there's no reason to be concerned right now as an Ohio State fan. But ultimately, and you may disagree with me, JR, I think this is a good win just for the Big Ten as a whole, because Penn State arguably has does have the worst loss in the Big Ten right now. And so for them to kind of level things back out and get this win is probably good for the conference as a whole right now. And I know you don't want to be on the bad end of that, JR, as an Ohio State fan, but I think that Ohio State's going to be fine going forward.
All right, that feels nice, Frank, but I don't exactly feel that right now. I hear what you're saying, and I think you make a lot of valid points. It's just I look at this team and they start Big Ten play, and it seems like every single year it's like, oh, well, this team, this player just had a career game against Ohio State. What are you going to do about that? And it's like at a certain point, maybe guys are having career games against Ohio State because Chris Holtmann can't coach defense. Like at some point, are we figuring this out? I know Eric is coming over here and he agrees with me. Holtmann can't win Big Ten games on the road, period. They definitely struggle on the road, and I'm trying to be more optimistic here. I've been a Holtmann apologist for years, and after last year, I'm just like, this team has to do something. They have to get to the tournament. They have to go somewhere, and the biggest pain about it is that the athletic director for Ohio State is he's retiring in the summertime, and I can't imagine that somebody's going to come in and fire the basketball coach right away and hire their own guy. So I feel like no matter what, we're stuck with Holtmann at least one more year. But I don't want to make it about my soap opera on Holtmann, because Penn State did play a good game and they deserve credit as well. Chaps, what'd you see in this game? Shaps, not Chaps. Shaps, what'd you see in this game?
No, I'd be furious too, JR. I don't care who you're playing. If you blow an 18-point lead, I'm jumping like through a glass window with fury, and as a member of the firing squad for on the Javamen pod, we fall into two categories. You're either on the firing squad when things go bad, you're coming after Underwood and everybody, or on the other side, we refer to it as the human centipede, where you're always optimistic, and whatever crap they feed you, it's just coming right back out the other end. And so that's how our podcast is divided. I am a proud member of the firing squad. A lot of heat is on Brad Underwood this year. So if you need any advice for being on the squad when it comes to Holtman, we can happily provide that for you. But yeah, I'd be incredibly frustrated as well if you keep seeing the same result. And it really is just defensively, like if their shots aren't falling, can they get a stop when they need it? You have to be able to get stops. You have to stop these runs, because there's always going to be runs that if you get out to a big lead, you're going to go cold at some point. That's college basketball. Like they're not like great shooters most of the time. So like they're just going to go cold. That's how it works. And the other team is going to get hot probably at that same time, but you have to be able to get stops. It's tough on the road, obviously, when the other team gets going. Illinois just saw that in Tennessee as well. But yeah, I'd be furious blowing a lead like that. So don't feel bad about it. And who the hell is Leo O'Boyle, by the way? Like, where did this guy come from?
I didn't know about him until the Maryland game, but he's fun. He's a lot of
They
fun.
have to be making like O'Boyle rules shirts.
Have to. It's got to be a thing.
At Penn State already. Yeah.
That is true. You have to consider the name when somebody beats you really bad. So if you've gotten beat by Leo O'Boyle, things are not looking good for you, right?
Yeah, it makes it so much worse to get beat by Leo O'Boyle.
Oh man, thanks for making me feel worse there, Chaps. No,
anytime.
Yeah, more fuel to the fire for the firing squad. I'm here for
That's
it.
right. We're loaded.
No, I do want to give credit to Penn State, though. I don't want it to be all doom and gloom about Ohio State. Penn State did come back after that Maryland game, which, by the way, another error down there. 1-1, not 1-0. So I'll get these figured out someday. Sorry, guys. First day with the graphics, okay? Give me a break. But, yeah, no, I thought Clary played a really good game in this one. He's kind of coming into himself and coming into the player that I think Penn State needs him to be. My concern with this Penn State team early in the season is I didn't really feel like they had an identity. I felt like it was like hey, Mike Rhodes is coming over from VCU. That's what we got. It was kind of like, what's
he
the
brought
identity?
Ace Baldwin with him.
Exactly. Like, what's the identity of this team? Who are they? And I think we're finding some more of that now. I still can't put a finger on it and say this is the identity of the team, but I feel like we're getting closer to that now. And so I think this is a very encouraging sign for Penn State. And you're right, Frank. The Big Ten needed a win like this for somebody who is lower on the totem pole to come up, because I don't think Penn State is a 14-13 team. I think they're closer to a 10 or 11 team in the Big Ten by the end of the year. But we'll see how it goes. And, who knows? I mean, Mike Rhodes, he might just be one of those guys that he's getting his team into it later on in the season, and we'll go from there. I don't think they're going to be a tournament team, but they definitely can be one of the teams in the Big Ten to challenge some of these other teams. So, all right, let's move on before I say anything about Chris Holtman that will get the page flagged or something like that. All right, Indiana. Oh my word, Frank's going to like talking about this one. Indiana loses 76-104 to Auburn. Just not a great game by Indiana. I was actually watching this one with my in-laws who are rabid IU fans, and just the entire game was like, why is this happening? What are you doing? Mike Woodson, what's going on? I don't think a single positive thing was said throughout the entire game, nor did they really deserve it. Auburn just kind of had their way in this one. Now, it was down in Atlanta, and, there was a lot made about that on the broadcast about how Bruce Pearl really gets a lot of guys from Atlanta, which is true. So I'm sure there was added motivation there for him. But even with that added motivation, I don't think a close to 30-point loss with the other team scoring triple digits really warrants what happened in this game. Frank, go ahead. We know you're enjoying this one. What are your thoughts?
Like I said, I try to root for Big Ten and non-con. I really do.
We understand if you don't root for IU, though.
But the big storyline before the game was, obviously Xavier Johnson wasn't playing. Yeah. That being said, I'm not sure his presence would have stopped what we saw. Who knows though? Who knows? But I think Indiana got out to the early lead. It was 26-20, 10 minutes into the first half. One thing we saw was Mackenzie Mbako hit a couple threes, and his stroke was looking good. But defensively, Auburn really looked to go after him. I felt like there was a couple times where he got lost in some switches, and they were just able to capitalize on it seemingly every single time. But really, we didn't see the greatest game from an efficiency standpoint. I think he was like 2 for 8 from the floor, so not what you want to see from him. I mean, and Renew was 6 for 12. He was 0 for 1 from 3. We've come to expect more from both of those by this point. But really, as I said last time I was on here, I think Trey Galloway is the guy who really needs to step up offensively. Like that's what Indiana's missing right now. And we've been seeing an uptick in CJ Gunn's minutes. And I'm just not a fan personally. And I'm not the biggest fan either of on-off numbers, but I looked at some on-off numbers for CJ Gunn. IU's offensive rating goes down 20 when he's on the floor. Their defensive rating goes up 21.3, which is pretty abysmal, honestly. So I don't know. I mean, Woodson obviously sees something in him, or he wouldn't be playing. I mean, Woodson has to know this. If I know it, he knows this. But yeah, I just felt like they did a really good job of exploiting every tiny mistake that IU made. And there wasn't a ton of mistakes, outside of some, missed switches early on, but they went off from 3. What was the Jalen Williams played a fantastic game, 24 points, 150 offensive rating. I really didn't expect this. I expected a closer game, especially being a neutral site. The first half, it definitely sounded like a pro IU crowd. And then it just was amazing how it shifted to a pro Auburn crowd in the second half. But I don't know. Did either of you see the video that Auburn basketball put out after the game too?
No, I didn't see that.
I don't know if you're familiar with the old "This Is IU" kind of music video, but they remade it, and it was actually a production done by Auburn, and they put a ton of time and effort and energy into it. And man, that would have been really embarrassing to put all that time in if they ended up losing the game. But it's entertaining. I would definitely give it a watch if you get some free time.
Was it on Twitter?
It is on Twitter. Yeah, they tweeted it. I mean, it's highly produced, and the lyrics are funny. I mean, they put a whole lot into it. I didn't realize Auburn was so into themselves, I'll say.
Well, Bruce Pearl's kind of into himself, so maybe it's rubbing off on the rest of them.
He took the words out of my mouth there.
I do not like Bruce Pearl. I'll just say it right now. I think you hit a lot of good points there. I as well am questioning what's going on with CJ Gunn. He just kind of strikes me as I had this kid named Dallas who played soccer with me in college, and he was one of those kids that like every day in practice he was just unstoppable, unbeatable. I mean, he would play so well in practice and looked like one of the best players on the team. And then you put him in the game and he was so tentative, and he never really accomplished what you felt like he could do based off what he did in practice. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what we're getting with CJ Gunn here. I mean, he's a freshman, so maybe some of that is coming out where he's comfortable playing hard in practice and being aggressive and doing those kind of things. But in the games, I just don't know if he looks super comfortable. And so I'm wondering if we're seeing that here. And Mike Woodson kind of, is known for pushing his players where if they feel uncomfortable, he's just going to put them out there and say, get through it and make the play. And I felt like he was doing that with CJ Gunn a little bit in this game. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for him. 18 minutes, only 3 points, 3 fouls, and only 1 rebound. That's a hard game for CJ Gunn. Shaps, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I assume Gunn is having to play more and have more responsibility because Xavier Johnson is out.
Yeah.
They're a totally different team without him. Yeah, by the time I flipped this game on, it was basically over with, by halftime. I was kind of watching the score a little bit, and then I was like, oh, okay, Indiana's getting off to a good start. I think they had a 12-point lead early in the game, and then I had to double check this. Auburn went on a 42-12 run to close the first half. That's hard to overcome. This was a tough watch for me as well because I hate Bruce Pearl so much. He basically destroyed the Illinois program in the early 90s when Illinois was really, really good. Coming off the Flying Illini stuff. And then he, snitched and said that we were paying off players when he was a coach at Iowa, and it wasn't true at all, but we still got slapped with some punishment by the NCAA. So he's a total scumbag. And obviously, I'm not a big fan of Indiana as
Firing
well.
squad for Bruce Pearl.
Yeah, always. He's always walking the plank. And so it was a tough watch for me, not liking either team. But yeah, the Indiana, like I said, they're just a different team without Xavier Johnson. They're still 2-0 in the Big Ten, though, so they'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on. They just don't have a lot of depth, So like if one or two guys go down, they really are going to struggle. I mean, their only losses so far are to UConn and Auburn, so it's not on paper like it doesn't look that bad. But the analytics say they're not a very good team on either end of the floor. They got Kansas coming up at home. That's probably not going to go well for them. But I guess you never know with their home crowd at Assembly Hall. So maybe they can pull off the upset there. It'll be interesting to watch. But if Xavier Johnson's out, I don't think it'll go well.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see the effects of Xavier Johnson being out. Some of these other games, we saw Gabe Cupps really come alive and play some really strong defense and really energetic. But, that energetic, strong, defense game can only last for so long if you really don't have anything else. And I'm not trying to disparage Gabe Cupps. I really like him as a player, and I think that he's going to turn into something very good. But he's still just a freshman. And it's tough coming into a team like this where guard play is going to be so crucial for your bigs, especially with Xavier Johnson going down. For Gabe Cupps to really turn into who they need this fast. Not everybody can be Braden Smith and turn into the perfect guy you need freshman year, right, Frank?
Must be nice.
That's hard to do. But yeah, so all right, let's move on to our last game. Michigan, oh my goodness, I'm really stinking with the stats today. Iowa XX should be 80. Michigan beats Iowa 90-80 in this one.
It should say TT for Iowa, right?
Yeah, it should say TT for Iowa.
Michigan 90, Iowa doesn't matter. That's
right?
That's what that means ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah. Fran leaves the game early. Really got upset in this one. Was upset with a number of things that were going on. But I mean, Fran's gonna do as Fran does. I think if somebody walked and stepped on his toe, he would get a technical foul. Getting upset about that, but just one of those games. I think Michigan really needed this one. Iowa just wasn't catching what they needed. I guess you could say. But Frank, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about some other games kind of being a must-win for both teams, and I feel like this one was that case, but to the greatest degree of all these games we've talked about. Iowa coming off of two pretty bad losses, just with respect to score. Michigan being 4-5 and coming off of 3 straight losses. It was a really ugly start to the game. Neither team really was finding any scoring rhythm early on. Iowa started opening some things with their empty side pick and rolls. And, as I said last time I was on here, I really feel like one of the big keys for Michigan was going to be Taurus Reed. And I think he had a career high in points tonight. He had 19 points, 7 for 10 from the floor, 5 for 7 at the line. And really, he was able to do that at a night when Doug McDaniel was kind of not playing his best basketball. We'll say he's been kind of in a little bit of a slump lately. But really, just Iowa couldn't find a ton going offensively. I mean, Krikke did what he does, but it felt like nothing came easy for him. He was making a lot of really tough shots. So kudos to him for playing a really good game. But Tony Perkins had 19, which was really nice to see as well. But Sanford 10, and then McCaffrey with 10, and there was a huge drop off after that. No one else in double digits. Seeing the McCaffrey ejection is always fun. I don't know why I get entertainment out of that, but I felt he was justified in being angry. Those are back-to-back offensive fouls that they got called against Iowa, and I feel like his leash is much shorter than a lot of referees because he has that history. But ultimately now, I mean, Iowa sits at 5-5, and what does the future look like for them? They've dropped almost 25 ranking spots in KenPom in the month of December. There's a whole lot, and they do have a couple easy games coming up, Florida A&M and UMBC, but then it's right back into conference play for them. They were a top 10 offense, and now they're ranked 20th in KenPom. They really need to figure out things on the defensive end, in my opinion, though. But really big win for Michigan. A team that's struggled with Juwan Howard sort of being the coach and sort of not being the coach. I'm still not sure how all that's working. But there was a lot of confusion on the sideline. There was some stuff going around on Twitter about some coaches not really sure who's making calls and whatnot. But big win for Michigan. But I'm slightly concerned for Iowa right now, and I'm curious to see what they'll try to do to turn things around going forward.
Yeah, I think for Michigan, if you win a game where Doug McDaniel scores the least amount of points in your starting lineup, that's a good win for you because he has been so relied upon as the offensive, number one on this team that if you can win this game without making that happen, that's really good. And having 7 assists tonight, I mean, credit to McDaniel. He was able to pivot and say, hey, I'm not hitting a lot of shots this game. I'm 4 for 12. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to make my teammates better, get them what they need. So a lot of credit to them. I think you saw what you wanted to see out of this Michigan team after some stinker games lately that Michigan fans I know weren't too happy to see. Shafts, what were some of your thoughts on this game?
It was interesting because, coming into the game, these are two eerily similar teams, especially when you look at Ken Pom, top 25 offense and just abysmal defense. So I was expecting a high score game, and that's exactly what we got. Michigan just couldn't miss a shot, basically, in the second half, and Iowa, per usual, they couldn't get a stop. They're not going to figure it out on the defensive end, Frank, because they never figure it out on the defensive end under Fran. But Fran is so entertaining. I love him so much. I love watching him. It's just hysterical. He's never going to change. He knows he's going to get teed up every single time, but he still just goes nuts. His assistant coach is holding him back, and it just doesn't matter. You're never going to get calls. Like, the Big Ten refs are horrible. But the fact that he's been doing this for so long and he still can't control himself is just so funny to me. I hope he never changes this, but it was an entertaining game for sure because of the high scoring affair and two good offenses. Exactly what we expected out of them. I still haven't figured out these teams at all, like Michigan and Iowa. I don't know what they're going to do when it comes to, January, February. It's going to be kind of interesting to see. But right now they look like two very similar teams that are still kind of trying to figure out the roles. We know they can score a lot of points and they're going to get up and down the floor. They're going to hit shots, but are they going to be able to get enough stops to move into the upper half of the Big Ten? That's what'll be interesting to see. My last note is that I think we should outlaw college basketball games on NFL Sundays. Just like I want to be focused on the red zone. The Bears even got a win today, which I didn't really want them to get a win today, but I'll take it against Detroit. But having to watch college basketball on NFL Sundays is not really my favorite.
Well, I saw C.J. Stroud get hurt in his game, so I knew it was going to be a bad NFL
Yeah.
game for Ohio State fans.
Didn't
that's
expect
sad.
that game. Yeah,
sad for him. But we'll stay on basketball here. I agree.
Justin Fields looked good though.
Which I know you're happy about. No, I agree with everything you said there, Shaps. It was just a high scoring offensive affair. Both of these teams need to figure out defense. Looks like Michigan was able to figure it out more in this game. But I question if Fran just has no desire for defense, if he just doesn't have any coach that can coach it. I mean, we brought it up on the last podcast. Like, there's just no polar opposite basketball and football team more than Iowa right now. And you can say the same thing about both coaches. Like, is it just inept coaching on offense for Iowa's football team? Is it inept coaching on defense for Iowa's basketball team? I don't know what it is. At a certain point, like, I can get the defensive, like, style of play, that's who we are type of thing. I can get that in football. I can't get it in basketball. There is so much that comes from good defense in basketball. I just think you can't ignore it like that. And I'm wondering, is Fran just ignoring it at this point, which is really, really sad. But, this was a lot of our concerns with Iowa going into the season. Do they have a number one scorer? Do they have that NBA guy who can come in and score at will and make the offense just hum at this amazing pace. And unfortunately, I don't think they do. So I'm really feeling bad about this Iowa team going into the rest of the season. If they have zero defense to lean on, and they're still trying to figure out who that scorer is game in and game out that can put things together for them. Because Peyton Sandford, I don't think he is who they kind of hoped him to be. So.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be kind of like the next in line for those, great Iowa players that we've seen recently. And Fran, to his credit, has always had one dominant player, from Garza to the Murray brothers. And just, yeah, like you said, it doesn't seem like he has that necessarily this year. So they're probably going to really struggle because of that.
I mean, I could see him being like a Jordan Bohannon at some point. Is Bohannon? I forget how to say his name. I disliked watching him so much. But he was kind of like, I feel like he could kind of be like what he was, but he doesn't have that download threat like a Garza or somebody to really make it open for him and really show that offense the way it needs to be there. So, all right, Frank, you got any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No. Thanks for having me on. It's a great time as always.
All right. Thanks, Frank. Shaps, you got any final thoughts?
This was fun. I'm glad I was finally able to join. Yeah, I've been a big fan of your work, JR, so far, and it's been really fun to follow along and be part of the Big Banter Network now.
Hey, appreciate it. The Javamen are always welcome here on the Big Ten Huddle. So, as is the Boiler Express, Frank. So, all right, we'll get out of here. Don't forget to check out Big Banter, BigBanterSports.com for the Javamen, Boiler Express, and all our other podcasts, football and basketball, all the things you need there. So, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
See ya.